Okay, Danielle, well, I think we'll get started. It's past 5:30 and a few people have joined us now. So I'd like to welcome everyone today to our webinar. My name's Helen Dyer, Business Manager at Thorntons. I'd like to introduce you all to Danielle McNamee, who's the Managing Director at ProcessWorx. We've worked together with Danielle for some time now, and we're really happy to have her join us today for this webinar on workplace safety. I might just pass it straight over to you, Danielle.
Thank you, Helen. Hi, everybody. Lovely to have the opportunity to speak with you today. What I really want to do is just provide a real understanding of the new laws in terms of what has got passed through and is actually coming into play, we think probably in July, of the Work Health and Safety Act. So basically we're changing from the Occupational Safety and Health Act to the Work Health and Safety Act. And so today I'm going to cover some information as it relates to farms about important aspects of the Act. There'll be plenty of opportunity at the end to have any questions, so feel free to ask me questions at the end. In terms of what is the object of the Act, it really is very similar to the previous Act, and that is to secure the health and safety of workers in the workplace. What's quite different is this definition of workers. So whereas in the past, under the Occupational Safety and Health Act, which has been in play for a long time, we were looking primarily at employees, now a worker is considered a person who carries out work in any capacity for a person conducting a business or undertaking, and I'm going to talk to you what that means in a minute, including employees, contractors or subcontractors, employees of a contractor or subcontractor, labour hire workers, outworkers, apprentices or trainees, work experience students, volunteers, and basically a person of prescribed class, which pretty much opens it up to everyone. So what this basically means is that anyone who pretty much steps on your farm, you have an obligation under the Act to secure their health and safety. And that's a real key difference and something that's really important to be aware of. It's no longer just focusing primarily on employees. So what is the farm owner considered under the Act? They're called a person conducting a business or undertaking. So we refer that as a PCBU. And this can be a partnership or an incorporated association. So basically, if you own a farm in whatever in any structure, you are now considered a person of responsibility under the Act. And what that means that you must ensure, so far as reasonably practicable, the health and safety of workers. This is called the primary duty of care. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about duty of care shortly, because this is really important, because the duty of care has changed under the Act. It's become much broader in terms of what you need to do and what you need to be responsible for. So just to be really, really clear, if you own a farm, you are completely responsible for essentially anyone who steps on your farm, and you must be demonstrating that you are meeting your duty of care under the Act. You might ask, okay, what about farm managers? Because quite a few farms you might own a farm, but you might not be actively involved on managing the farm. So you could have a number of our clients have farm managers in place. A farm manager sits under the Act under the classifications under the Act as an officer, and that's got the same type of responsibility as a farm manager. So if you pretty much as the farm manager making majority of decisions for managing that farm, then you have an obligation under the Act to again ensure as reasonably practicable the health and safety of workers and other persons, which is the primary duty of care. Now, this term reasonably practicable is a funny term. What really does it mean? Under the Act, it's basically looking at what was reasonably able to be done in relation to ensuring health and safety, taking into account and weighing up all relevant matters. So, for example, if it's going to cost $1 million to fence every dam on the property, then that may not seem to be reasonably practical. That might be an example of something that someone would say that doesn't make good sense because that could, severely damage the financial future of the farm. So if we think about it in terms of weighing up the risks and weighing up the practicability, then that's where that term comes into play. So what is your duty of care? What does this mean to your farm? So essentially, it's the provision and maintenance of a work environment without the risk to health and safety. So you essentially have a responsibility to providing a work environment free from risks to health and safety. Provision and maintenance of safe plant and structures. Provision and maintenance of safe systems of work. So this is very, very important that you actually have safe systems, safe methods of conducting work. Safe use, handling, storage of plant structures and substances. Provision and adequate facilities for the welfare at work of workers. And this is a new one that's been added in there. And you might remember that it used to be you would have personal protective equipment and clothing was part of the duty of care under the Act, and that's now been taken out. But this provision of adequate facilities for the welfare at work of workers is very important and does relate to mental health. Also provision of any information, training, instruction or supervision to protect workers from their risks to health and safety. Monitoring the health and safety of workers to prevent illness and injury. This is really interesting, it's been added in, maintaining any housing for a worker so that they are not exposed to risks of health and safety. This is particularly relevant to farms where you do have the houses on the farm and you've got people living in there. So you must make sure that they are not exposing anyone to risk of health and safety. And also very important is the consultation with workers on safety and health matters. So that means that you need to be talking to your workers on the farm about any changes that affect safety and health. With the information and training is making sure that you are actually orientating and inducting staff on the farm. So we're going to go through shortly kind of my recipe for success to make sure you're meeting these these duty of cares. So there's been a lot of talk about industrial manslaughter, which has now come in. And I think it's important to understand what industrial manslaughter is. It is if a worker dies or is injured and later dies, and the person, so the senior officer or the farm owner, causes the death, their conduct causes the death. They must have also not met their obligations of health and safety duty of care. And this is a really important one, that the farm manager or the owner has engaged in conduct knowing that it is likely to cause death and disregards this likelihood. So you can see that's a really high bar. In my experience dealing with hundreds and hundreds of farmers, no farmer, wants to deliberately go out and hurt their staff and do something that would hurt or kill their staff. So whilst it's not great to have this industrial manslaughter included in the Act, and there is a maximum penalty of 20 years jail and a fine of 5 million, I'm not hugely worried about industrial manslaughter. What worries me more are other offences and penalties. And the one that worries me most is the category 1. So this is when either a farm owner or farm manager fails to comply with their duty of care, and that causes the death or serious harm. So this is where there is no intent. And, I talk to farmers every day who literally have no safety system, have no policies and procedures, practices in place, and not, doing inductions, have nothing written down. They might be believing that they are, following safe work practices, and I'm not saying that they're not, but the reality is there is no documentation to support that. Now, you're failing your duty of care in doing that, and then if someone does die for you not following your duty of care, then the penalty is 5 years imprisonment and a fine of $680,000. So that's what really, really worries me. Not so much the industrial manslaughter, because there has to be intent. Look, there's penalties all through the new Act, but the ones just that I wanted to highlight was also the category 2, which is again a failure to comply with health and safety duty. The failure exposes the worker to a risk of death, and that has penalty fines between 170,000 and 1.8 million. And category 3, whereas simply that you fail to comply with your health and safety duty, which is looking at fines between 55,000 and 570,000. So that's simply not meeting duty of care, so not having any evidence that you are meeting a duty of care under the Act, you can be fined. Okay, so that's all very serious and intense, and I suppose that's all the kind of the bad news. I think the good news is that there is a way to be able to demonstrate that you're meeting a duty of care under the Act, and what that will actually do is actually make your farm a safer place for the workers on your farm, which will result in a lower risk of injury and death, which is, ultimately what you want. We've been involved in, some farms where there has been injuries and death, where, to be honest, it's the penalties is the last thing you're worried about. It's having to phone up someone's family member and let them know that they have been seriously injured or died is horrific. So what I'm passionate about is helping farms set up systems in place so that you can actually have a safer work environment, because I think we all know that farms are one of the most dangerous workplaces statistically across Australia, just with all the risks that are associated with them. So what do we need? Apart from like a really passionate and good attitude towards keeping the workplace or the farm place safe, we need safe system of work. And I want to talk about a little bit about what that includes, and that is a risk register. And I'm actually going to spend a bit of time going through what a risk register is and how you put one together. Because if you don't understand the risks of your farm, then it's impossible to manage those risks and have a system that supports the management of those risks. Also, we're going to talk a bit about policies and objectives, processes that are important in terms of managing your staff, and safe work procedures. First of all, why is a risk register so important? Well, apart from the fact that it identifies risks, it prioritises time and resources. So particularly in an environment on a farm, there are many, many risks. How do you basically look and rate those risks from what is the highest priority to the less priority? Because, if you don't want risk and you don't want danger, well, you don't farm, because that's just a reality of life. So a risk register helps you prioritise time and resources. The legislation actually does require you to identify hazards and assess the risks, and to eliminate the risks as far as reasonably practical. And this risk register is a form of evidence. So it's a great opportunity to go through, assess your risks, show how you're managing those risks, and it is evidence. And it's a documented plan of how to mitigate risk. So think of it as a plan. So to build a risk register, there are 4 key steps. First of all, you have to identify the hazards. Then you need to assess the risk, so actually rate the risk. Then you have to look at eliminating or minimising the risk as far as reasonably practicable through the implementation of control measures. And finally, you have to evaluate the effectiveness of control measures in eliminating or reducing the risk. So there's no point going through this process and then you work at the end of it, you never actually check, has it actually helped reduce the risk? So we have to make sure we have that. So let's first look at and talk about, if we want to build a risk register, and this is what I want to do with you today, is just to step through building a risk register, is identifying the hazards. So you need to consult with all your farm personnel. So you actually get feedback from your team. What do you believe is risky? What do you believe could cause harm? What do you believe could cause potential death? You want to review previous incidents. So has there been a reoccurring incident where someone, has injured a part of their body? Or, for example, is there fatigue, issues around fatigue management that's been popping out? And you need to conduct a site inspection of the farm. So basically, in its simplest form, it's about going around and working out, what could hurt somebody. It's as simple as that. Consulting with your people, reviewing previous incidents, and doing a walk around the farm. Next, we have to look at assessing the risk. And basically that's looking at what is the negative outcome. So for example, I'm hoping you can see that on the screen. I'll read it for you if you can't. But for example, having employee families reside on the farm, so with children, what is the negative outcome? So children interfacing with hazardous equipment areas could cause death. Okay, that's the negative outcome. Visitors on the farm being lost or interfacing with unfamiliar hazardous equipment areas. Living remote on site in remote location, mental health and depression. So the next stage of building a risk register, after you've identified what is the hazard, what is the problem, what could be the outcome? Okay, what could be the consequence? So for example, using some machinery, it could be, losing a body part if everything went wrong. So it's fatigue management. It could be about fatigue. It could be about, crashing a vehicle. So we're basically going through and we're identifying what is the negative outcome. Once we've identified the negative outcome, we have to find a way to rate it. And so what we recommend is just a very simple risk methodology where you would have two categories. So you would have the likelihood of something happening, which would be unlikely, possible, and likely. So for example, likely is the event rarely or never occurs and would require significant system failures to occur. Possible would be the event seems reasonably possible to occur under system failures. Likely is the event is expected to occur under system failure. And then consequences would be minor, first aid, injury, illness, medically treated injury, illness, minor environmental impact, minor asset damage. Serious would be restricted duties of injury from injury, illness, lost time injury, serious environmental impact, serious asset damage. And major would be disability or fatality, major environment impact, major asset damage. So what we do then is we have a rating, a little matrix that we set up, which you can see on the slide now. And we would basically decide if something was likely to occur and it had a minor consequence, then it would be a moderate. If something was likely to occur and it had a major consequence, it would be high. And you can see we've just got the three categories there. Low, which is continue the tasks you've been authorised, apply standard risk control procedures. Moderate is continue the tasks you've been authorised for additional risk control measures. And high is the manager needs to authorise the task, additional risk control measures may be required. So this is just a methodology, and there are many, many different methodologies that you can use. We've chosen the simple 3x3. It's a very simple, straightforward approach that helps you rate and work out which risks you need to focus on. So when you're calculating your risk, you determine the likelihood of the harm, you determine the potential consequence, you match up the cells, which gives you the risk score. And once you have determined the risk scores, you record these scores into the risk register. You can see what we've done there. So what we've done here is basically said, this is the issue, this is the problem, this is the negative outcome, so this is what can happen as a result of that problem. And this is our way of rating the risk to determine what needs to have a high focus. And so basically anything with a high focus is where you would focus initially. So when we're looking at, we've got risks, we then got to look at how we're going to manage that risk. So our focus would be initially on the higher risk, and there's a hierarchy of controls, which is all about risk. And so elimination is obviously the best thing. We can remove the hazard, cancel it, the task is not required. Then that's obviously preferable. Then there's substitution. For example, that might be a chemical. We might use a less hazardous chemical that has been used before. We've got isolation. That would be about putting a barricade around a hazard, for example. Administration is things like having a system, checklists, meetings, training, and protection comes down to things like, you know, putting on gloves, earplugs, steel cap boots, etc. This is just a guide in terms of how you can approach reducing that risk to a reasonable level. So then what we do, so once we've basically gone through and put in our negative, what our risk is look at how we can manage it. So for example, if we look at our employee families reside on farm, the negative outcome is children interfacing with hazardous equipment areas. It's high based on our grading system. Then what do? So one of the control measures is isolation. And that's putting fences around residential properties. So if that is reasonable and practicable, then that is a solution to that risk. For example, with visitors on farm, them being lost and getting into some kind of trouble, we've graded that as a moderate risk. We can escort new visitors, and that's seen as an engineering approach. Basically, what you want to do is build something like this around your farm. And look, when you do it, it's obviously going to be a lot longer than these few pages I've used as examples. But basically going through and looking at all the things that can go wrong. What could go wrong? Putting in a risk, developing control measures by helping and looking at the hierarchy. And then what you have to do is obviously implement those control measures. So, for example, you know, you can do this as a simple system, is basically highlighting ones that that have been already done. You could highlight control measures as a first priority, a second priority, and a third priority. Again, it's up to you, and it's nothing black and white in the act about how you approach a risk assessment. It's basically about identifying the risk and making sure that you put control measures in place and getting that risk to a level that's manageable under your duty of care. No point, and I've seen this happen in the past where we've done risk assessments for farmers and done the risk assessment, spent quite a bit of time doing it. And then that's it. It just sits as a document on the computer or in the top drawer and never gets looked at. Risk assessments or risk registers have to be a living document. You should review it at least once a year. If there are any significant changes to the organisation and after any significant incident, injuries and illnesses. It's also critical that that risk assessment is used to help develop your systems and processes for supporting your safety and health at the farm. And for example, you know, you may identify a number of risks on your farm that require safe work procedures. And that's a way to manage that risk. So you've actually got clear instructions to your staff that they can actually follow. And I'm going to give you an example of one shortly. I'd normally ask any questions at this point, but I think it's a bit hard. We'll leave questions to the end. So in terms of the documents to include with safe systems and work, really important to have processes in place. So one of the things we focus on is that you should have a process in terms of inducting and orientating staff, everything around farm management. So step-by-step guides on emergency preparedness, hazard reporting, communication, annual reviews, equipment register, chemical register. How do you do incident management? Do you know when you have to basically let WorkSafe know when there's a critical incident? Dealing with rehabilitation, incident notification. And really important now, much more so than was on the previous Act, is the duty of care for contractors. So really important to have processes around contractor management, onboarding your contractors and the ongoing management of them. So we suggest you have key processes, which are dot points about how you manage those in your farm. And then depending on the safe, kind of the issues you develop out of your risk register, what safe work procedures you need. Now, I imagine that most farms, or in my experience, most farms need children in the workplace, because there's normally a family on a farm with children. So that's, for example, something that's on every farm, just like first aid would be on every farm. However, grain handling, that's a safe work procedure that's not necessarily going to be on a cattle farm if cattle farm don't do any harvest any grain. Most farms have had hazardous chemicals. So what I've put up here is just some key safe work procedures that we as an organisation identify as pretty much core for farms. Things like interface with public roads and rail safe, areas like that, wildlife. And so it's really important that you have safe work procedures, which are step-by-step guides, which are basically the rules on how you deal with those situations. One of the things we really promote is having that in either a manual or some kind of online form, and obviously making sure that when you bring on new staff, even if they've been there for a while, but also obviously your casuals, your backpackers, not that we can get a lot of them at the moment, that you train them in this. So very important. This whole focus on training, induction, orientation, communication, consultation is really significant in the Act. There's no point having all this material if you're not actively sharing it with your staff. So what I wanted to do now, just to try and, I suppose, keep it, take it back to how you can practically work on this, is just to look at, for example, managing the risk of hay. So the kind of thing that you would do in this situation, so this is how you would build this into your risk assessment and also do a safe work procedure, is think about, what are the hazards? And obviously the main hazard with hay is moving the hay bales, which can be large and heavy and can fall on bystanders or on a tractor operator. What are some practical solutions? For example, ensure tractors have a foiling object, protective barrier, ensure bales are secured with appropriate tractor attachments. When moving large bales, also consider using a rear attachment. So different things that you can do. And then what rules can you write into a safe work procedure? And so just to give you an example, it doesn't have to be hugely complex. So we can have managing the risk of hay. This could be like a mini safe work procedure for that. So don't move large bales in the buckets of front end loaders. Ensure the loads does not obstruct the operator's vision. Keep the load as low as possible to prevent overturning. Check for overhead power lines before raising a load. Ensure bystanders are kept out of the range from rolling bales. Operate at low speed and with steady movement. Bales are stable and secure before moving. That's just some examples. What I'm trying to show you is that it really doesn't have to be complex. It's for you, the farm owner and the farm manager. It's all in your head. It's all common sense. You know how to manage your farm. What I really want to kind of get out there today is that it's just important to have that documented and have that communicated to anyone who is actually present on your farm. Before I go to some questions, so I want to absolutely leave some time for some questions because I find that people have got quite a lot, and it's been impossible for me to obviously cover every possible change in the Act, but I just wanted to cover the key bits that I think you need to know. Is just to, I suppose, take this opportunity to say, one of the things we're seeing at ProcessWorx across, because we do human resources and safety, and we work with cattle farms, grains farms, avocado farms, pig farms, olive farms, all different types of agriculture, winery. One of the areas where we have concerns, where we think there is real risk from both a safety and health point of view and also an industrial relations point of view, and I like to take the opportunity whenever I have it when I'm talking with farmers, is just fatigue management. And we are just seeing people not following basic fatigue management guidelines. And so I just wanted to kind of refresh what we think is really working in maximum shift for 12 hours, which I know can be a push in the really busy times. Making sure you have a day off after 13 days, making sure you have a rest between shifts of 7 hours, making sure you have breaks. And for example, under the industrial relations system, if you sit under the pastoral law, if you don't give your employees breaks, you have to pay them double time until they have breaks. And I've had a couple of situations where we've had to defend this in Fair Work, and the farmer has been charged that, which has been quite significant, as you can imagine. Ensure rest breaks, no driving periods over 12 hours, ensuring rest breaks every 3 to 4 hours, alternating high workload tasks between personnel, and keeping call-outs to a minimum. Just wanted to be really clear. And again, this is a little example of these tips of what you could turn into a safe work procedure, but just being really aware that fatigue management is a real issue on farms that we're seeing, and we think it's really important. We believe WorkSafe and the Fair Work Commission are really cracking down on it. Anyway, I've been talking non-stop, and I'm sure you're ready for some questions. Helen, would you like to open it up to see if anyone's got some questions or would require any further information that I can share with them?
Yeah, thanks, Danielle. At the moment, there haven't been any questions.
No questions? Oh my gosh.
Actually, I've got a hands up here from Kate. Kate, did you want to ask a question? There's the Q&A box down the bottom there. If you wanted to type in your question there, then we can actually answer it. Oh, here we go. Hi, Danielle.
Hi.
Kate's typing the question now. Oh, there you go. So there's a question there. How long do you think this procedure should take to set up? That's the question there.
Oh, a safe work management system. Yeah. Well, it depends. Obviously, I'm going to say, because this is what I do for a living, that it's obviously a lot easier to go with someone like ourselves. There's also Safe Farm as well. To do it yourself, I mean, it's by the time you look under the Act, you have to do the risk assessment yourself. You can do it with our guidelines, the help of safety providers. But yeah, you're looking at writing all those procedures and putting it all together. Several weeks' work. You can get stuff downloaded from the internet. WorkSafe does have some stuff which is available.
That ties in actually with another question there from Karina. Do you recommend templates from WorkSafe? So there are some templates available.
The issue, obviously WorkSafe is great, but the issue, I think what we started working with the farms 4 years ago, and basically what we have found, with the exception of Safe Farm, who provide you a manual, they still don't help you with your risk register. There's no one really out there who is customising a safety management system to West Australian farms and providing the coaching and the support to do it. So yes, you can download generic templates, but I haven't found anything. It's more generic. So there's definitely generic stuff. There's stuff, it's called like a little trade pack on Safe Work, but that's more written for a general small business. I think if you're wanting a customised safety management system with you need to go either with Safe Farm, who are our competitors that we get on very well with, or us who basically specialise in this area.
Great. Thanks, Danielle. There's another question there from Anne. How do rental properties on farm fit into that?
Well, the rental property, are they renting to the staff?
I would assume they're renting to staff. And can you just...
So there's two things. If you're renting to your staff under the Act, the fact that they're living on a house on your farm, you have a duty of care under the Act to keep it safe. And separately, completely separate out of farming safety and health, if it was just, say, you were renting to someone that wasn't an employee, then you have a duty of care under the Tenancy Act.
Yeah, I think that's actually what she's referring to there. She says not renting to staff, so it's obviously...
yeah, but under the Tenancy Act, yeah.
Yeah, so that, that's kind of outside of this, but under the Tenancy Act. Well, at the moment, there's no other questions. Danielle, did you want to cover, just while you're here, the other services that ProcessWorx?
Yeah. So essentially, like from a kind of safety point of view, I think what we do is we'll provide you with all your system on an online portal. The thing I love about it is it's got an online induction. So all staff, whenever they start, have to go through the online induction, which goes through all the safe work procedures that we've written for you. So, we can do from a safety point of view, we do everything from helping you with your risk assessment, all your processes, your policies, your procedures, your online learning, and training we can come on site. We do charge extra on site, a lot of training on Zoom and over the phone in terms of actually getting it in place and being there if you've got a problem, to call us and help you when you need to work through safe work. So we cover that full suite of safety. And then from a human resource point of view, we can do as little, and that's called our safety package, and that's information on that is on our website. And then we also handle everything to do with human resources on farms. So that's everything from your employment contracts, right through to all your policies and procedures, your better off overall test, unfair dismissals, disputes with pay. So our kind of really, the business is primarily now focused just helping farms in the HR and safety space.
Thanks, Danielle. And after this, I'll email a link to your website together with a recording for it.
And if anyone's interested in getting a proposal, then what I do when I send out a proposal is I actually give you a link to our demo portal, so you can actually have a look at what you get and have a play with the online induction and actually see how the safe work practices and procedures are presented and what the staff have to go through.
Yep. I do have another question here from Kate. The question is, in regards to contractors, can you email the contractor owner the necessary documents and trust it will filter down to their employees? So is that considered to be reasonably practicable to do it that way?
So what I would suggest is that you would induct, I mean, look, if it's a electrician that comes on your farm once a year, that's very different to a regular contractor. If there's a regular contractor and those staff are working on your farm, I would get them all I would induct them all. So if you have an online induction, I'd get them all to do the online induction. So you have, I mean, they have a responsibility as well, but you also have a responsibility. Even if you don't have an online induction, but you've just got an induction checklist, I'd get them to sign off on that.
Okay. So hopefully that helps you, Kate, there with your question. Does anyone have any other questions at the moment on this topic or other topics? It looks like no. So it looks like we've answered all the questions there, Danielle. So I guess rather than stretching it out, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and if anyone's got any questions, just give me a call, or you can go on my website. And what I wanted to do today is just, I probably feel like I have overwhelmed you a bit, but I've tried to just focus on the key bits in the Act that are changed that I think is relevant to farmers.
Yeah, no, I think it was a great summary. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, there's one more question here. What about shearing contractors where you have the same contractor but different shearers?
I still think under this new Act that you have, and I know what people say about shearers, that they're not computer literate or they're not literate full stop, and it's very, very hard to induct them. But I would, if you have an online induction, get them to go through, sorry, I would get them to go through the induction, or I would get them to do a sign off, an induction checklist sign off, and just explain to them the key risks, and get each shearer for that period of time to sign it off.
Right, thank you. So thanks, Anne. That was another good question. Okay, well, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you for presenting to us, Danielle. That was great. It was really interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you have any other questions, I'll send them through to you. Otherwise, we'll just leave it there. I'll end there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.